In today's video, we're talking about whether or not there's a future for FSR 3 on the Steam Deck, if the Steam Deck is slowing down, and whether or not Valve is in the wrong here. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and this is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck and other gaming handhelds. So if you want to keep up to date on all the latest Steam Deck and gaming handheld news, make sure you subscribe and set your notifications to all. Before I jump into the bigger topics of this video, I wanted to give you a couple of quick PSAs about some games I've been playing. The first one is a racing game. I am a massive racing game fan. I just picked up a racing wheel finally, and I put so many hours into the Crew Motorfest and SnowRunner over the Christmas break. I really wish the Crew worked on the Steam Deck, but SnowRunner does, and it's awesome. My all-time favorite racing game, though, is Burnout Paradise, and EA, out of nowhere, a few years ago, released a remastered version of it, and since the Steam Deck came out, it hasn't worked. It's had issues in the EA launcher, and people were able to figure that out, and then once you got into the game, more issues cropped up where the game would just never let you into the open world. But now, I tried the game the other day, my 6-month check-in I usually do, and it works totally fine out of the box. It just installs, it starts up, and it just plays. And I looked around, and it seems like no one else has tried this decades-old racing game, so I wanted to let you know that you should definitely go try it out. It's an open-world racing game, and I think the thing that turns people off from it is the fact that it doesn't have licensed cars. I think that comes down to the fact that, all these car manufacturers don't want to see their cars get turned into little crumpled balls of aluminum foil when you hit a wall going 150 miles an hour, but Criterion, back in the day, EA let them have an imagination, so if there's a car you want to drive in this game, there is a Criterion version of it, and it's always a really cool take on that classic car. It also has one of the best soundtracks of any game ever. Like, so many of my favorite bands I discovered through this game, and once I played it for 6 hours at my kitchen island the other day, I went and immediately made a playlist of all the songs in the game because it's just that good. And finally, it performs perfectly. It runs at a completely locked 60 frames per second, 1280 by 800. It fills out the Steam Deck screen, and you can run it at max settings. So if you're looking for a really cool racing game that's different from everything else that's out right now, go play Burnout Paradise Remastered. The second game I want to give a PSA for is Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. I'm obviously jumping back into that because Dragon's Dogma 2 is coming out at the end of March. This is a game that I've tried to start so many times on the PS4, the Switch, my gaming PC, and the Steam Deck is where it really opened up for me because of one key factor, which is that I finally pushed through the god-awful tutorial, and I'm glad I did, because once you get to the first big city, Grand Soren, the game opens up and just becomes a completely different beast. It does have one issue, which is that it doesn't run very well on AMD chips. So on the Steam Deck, where you have an AMD chip, it kind of has a lot of frame drops and stutters out of the box, but there's an incredible mod that's quick and easy to install. It's drag and drop. It allows you to run it in the Vulkan API. And once I did that, again, just like with Burnout Paradise Remastered, locked 60 FPS, 1280 by 800, mostly maxed out settings. The reason I think everyone should give this game a shot before the sequel comes out is because it's kind of obtuse and it has a lot of systems to learn, and once you learn them, it's an incredible game, but that learning curve is pretty steep, and if you do that now with the first game, you'll hit the ground running in the second one, because I watched the IGN first gameplay, and for all intents and purposes, Dragon's Dogma 2 just seems like the same game, but with better graphics and some very minor quality of life adjustments. So again, if you get through the tutorial, you learn how to play the game, you put hundreds of hours into it like I am going to before the end of March, you'll be ready to go when the sequel releases. All right, with the PSAs out of the way, let's get into the first topic, which is FSR 3 on the Steam Deck. So ever since DLSS 3 and FSR 3 were announced, everyone's been kind of hoping that some form of this would make its way to the Switch and the Steam Deck, because being able to use frame generation, this new system that allows the graphics card to kind of insert AI generated frames when you're about to drop frames, is awesome, right? Like, it gives you a cleaner frame rate, it gives you a better frame rate, so what's really not to love about it? Then we got the disappointing news that FSR 3 would not be supported on the Steam Deck, either because the hardware is not strong enough, or it's too old, or because when you use it to play at lower frame rates like 30 FPS or 60 FPS, it introduces input lag. But that didn't stop modders, of course, from trying to get it to work, and we finally have a mod that makes it work on the Steam Deck. Now, of course, because it's early days, this isn't working 100%. There's issues issues with artifacting, there's issues with, you know, cutscenes not playing and other weird little small things that need to be ironed out. But the fact that this works means developers are going to continue to work on this mod, and I'm assuming as time goes on, it's just going to get better and better from here. And the reason you would want something like this is for games like Hogwarts Legacy or Jedi Survivor. You know, any of these games that are coming out, like Baldur's Gate 3 is another example, that are just too big for the Steam Deck, right? Like Baldur's Gate 3, it runs at 30 FPS for the most part until you get to Act 3, and then it completely falls apart. Hogwarts Legacy is one of the most played games on the Steam Deck, but I tried to play it over the Christmas break and it's not good enough. It has a lot of frame drops. It drops into the low 20s, and to get it running at a pretty much locked 30, you kind of have to drop the graphic settings so low that, for me at least, it just wasn't worth playing on the handheld. So if I could take advantage of something like FSR 3 and get that frame generation, maybe it would be an experience worth trying on the device. The actual mod is by a developer named LukeFZ, and he was able to get games like Hogwarts Legacy, Spider-Man Remastered, and Cyberpunk 2077 working with the technology. But in games like The Last of Us Remastered, unfortunately, you still need to set all the graphic settings to low to actually get an advantage using frame generation. The reason I'm talking about it today, though, is this is something that I think Valve should really be targeting for the Steam Deck 2. I know it's still a few years out because they give that classic line that hardware just isn't there yet, but in a few years, it might be there. And when you can take advantage of technology like this, it's not something that I think would need to be implemented all the time, because as good as it is, there are issues even when it's working at its top performance. Like, I use it in Starfield, and when you turn the camera too fast, if you're using a shotgun, it makes the reticle kind of like wobbly and wig out, and stuff like that really gets in the way of my immersion and my enjoyment of games. But if in 3 or 4 years down the line, this technology keeps evolving, as it most likely will, then you could kind of see how it would be useful on a handheld like the Steam Deck. And you know, the hardware itself should be advancing as well, to the point where maybe we could target 30 or 40 FPS out of these games in a few years. But I feel like even when we hit that point, right, where Valve announces the Steam Deck 2, releases the Steam Deck 2, we get it in our hands, it's just going to be a matter of time before the games that are coming out at that point are too big for the Steam Deck, and then we'll be in the same scenario we are now. But if they figure out how to make FSR 3 work on the device, then that'll extend the lifespan of the Steam Deck, and the ultimate goal of getting everyone to own one so we can keep talking about it and enjoying it with a huge community of gamers, that will be achieved, which is great. And the cool thing is, even in the state that this mod is in right now, it's not targeting 30 FPS with games like The Last of Us. Even if you're using it at the lowest settings, The Last of Us is able to run between 60 and 75 FPS on the Steam Deck, which is something that, for me at least, was an unheard of situation. I went back and I tried The Last of Us Remastered when they did all their patches and they said it was finally fixed, and even then, running it at the lowest settings, it's not an optimal experience. I said in my video at the time that it would be much better served playing it on a big beefy gaming rig or just the PS5 like everyone else did back when it came out, just because it's one of the best looking and like best running games really on the PlayStation 5, and you're kind of doing yourself a disservice smashing it down and lowering all the graphic settings and making it look all muddy and artifacty and just not good compared to how well it can run on bigger and better devices. But with it running as well as it does now with this mod, I could imagine that in 6 months to a year, when this mod is ironed out and really working its best on the Steam Deck, you could up the settings a little bit, right? Like maybe you mix in some medium, some high in there, and still get it to run at maybe 40 FPS, where you could lock it at that frame rate and get that frame generation working. And if you're locking it at that frame rate, I feel like the AI generated frames wouldn't come into play as often as they do if you're trying to run it at 60 or 70 FPS. But it is cool either way that this mod exists in the first place, because the Steam Deck is really just the entry point, right? Like you could imagine this being translated over to something like the Z1 Extreme equipped handhelds, the ROG Ally or the Legion Go. And then it makes handheld PC gaming such a more viable option to people, where you'll get the mainstream more involved than they already are. Next up here, I saw this news story on Tom's Hardware titled "Steam Survey Suggests More People Bought the RTX 4090 than the Steam Deck, along with millions of other 40 series GPUs." And at first I was a little frustrated with the article phrasing, just because, you know, they put the Steam Deck in the title just because more people are searching for a Steam Deck than they are for a 4090. But then I started to think about it more, and this actually makes a lot of sense. You could look at it and say, why are people going for gaming PCs that are equipped with these big GPUs over something like the Steam Deck as their only option? But I'd argue that the Steam Deck is never going to be, and was never envisioned to be, the only gaming PC people have. But if you're someone who has only had a PlayStation 5 or only had a Series X or a Nintendo Switch, it really could be an entry point into the ecosystem of PC gaming. So there's two options here, right? Like either you're someone like me who already had a gaming PC, you were all in on the PC gaming ecosystem and having a handheld where you could take your Steam library and your Steam saves on the go. That was an instant buy, no-brainer purchase because it gives you the ability to take the games you're already playing on the go, but not have to restart them. Like right there, that's me instantly sold on the device. But the other option, the other person that I feel like the Steam Deck is for is the person I just mentioned who has a PS5 or a Switch or a Series X, and they're maybe thinking about getting into PC gaming, but then they go to Best Buy, they go to Amazon, they go to Micro Center, and they see that the prices on parting out your own build or even getting a pre-built are just so much higher than what they're used to, right? Like the Switch OLED is $350, the Series X is $500, and so is the PS5. You compare that to a gaming PC. If you want to get a good one that's going to be able to run games at the level you think you're going to get a PC for in the first place, you're going to be spending well north of $1,000 right out of the gate, and I think that's a huge barrier for a lot of people. So you put the Steam Deck in the equation where you can get in on this thing for under $300 at this point if you go to the used market, or if you want to just go all bells and whistles and everything you can get on it, you can spend $700 and get the Steam Deck OLED with the 1TB SSD. That makes it a lot more palatable to people who I think are just used to cheaper prices when it comes to getting into gaming hardware. So when I see a survey come out that says people are buying 40 series graphics cards over something like the Steam Deck, that just makes perfect sense to me, because now is really the time where I feel like people who are in the 20 series of graphics cards or even the 30 series are really being forced to upgrade, because with a lot of games that are coming out like Jedi Survivor or Hogwarts Legacy, the big limiting factor for a lot of these games once you get past the CPU bottleneck is VRAM. A lot of the 30 series cards were shipping with 8 GB of VRAM, and as we're quickly finding out, that is just not enough for a lot of these modern games, which I don't really understand because the PS5 I think has a lot less VRAM than that, and it's able to manage games like Dead Space or Jedi Survivor just fine. But I run into an issue on my 4090 equipped laptop with Jedi Survivor where as you're playing it, the VRAM ticks up and up and up, and once it hits 90%, the game completely breaks down. So my 16 gigs of VRAM are barely enough for a lot of these modern games. So when you look at older cards that have 8 GB of VRAM, you're like, how are they even running these games in the first place? It turns out they're not. So right now, a lot of people are looking at bigger and better graphics cards because, you know, the new ones are about to come out at CES and all the other ones are on sale. And then of course you also get the win-win scenario, which is your Steam Deck and your PC can run a game. You can play it on your PC at your desk or on your couch or wherever the hell you play your PC games. And then when you have to go to bed, you can get your Steam Deck and then just pick up right where you left off. And you get that synergistic, great feeling that I get when I play Dragon's Dogma here in my basement. And then when I want to go play it in bed, I can stay up till 4 or 5 in the morning, way later than I'm supposed to, playing this awesome game. So to answer the question of whether or not the Steam Deck is slowing down too much and it's not a viable option for people, I don't think that's the case at all. And the third thing I wanted to talk about today is this new situation that's come up related to secondhand Steam Decks, because people are of course selling their Steam Deck LCD models once they get an OLED model. I am not doing that. I'm keeping my 2 LCDs just in case I ever need to do hardware mods for videos or I get a new SSD in that I want to try out. There is no way in hell I am cracking open my limited edition OLED, because that device, as far as I'm concerned, with the 1TB that it comes with, is just fine, especially when I equipped it with that 1TB SD card that I had from my other Steam Deck. But of course, other people want to sell their devices, which I don't begrudge at all, because, you know, upgrading during a mid-gen refresh is always kind of a bummer because you have to spend not only the full price that you paid at the launch of the device, but also there's a premium on top of it that kind of brings along those new features like the OLED screen and all of the other advancements that came along with the Steam Deck OLED, specifically the limited edition model. So yeah, making back $200 or $300, that makes that upgrade a lot more palatable. But the situation this person ran into is they bought a secondhand Steam Deck and then they were playing with it and then they broke it. And then when they sent it in for RMA, Valve checked the serial number and said, hey, we can't do anything with this Steam Deck because it was stolen. It was marked stolen and then it was sold, and now you bought it and you broke it and we can't fix it because it was stolen. And people are kind of coming after Valve for this because since the Steam Deck came out, Valve has been extremely good about the warranty process on the Steam Deck. It was a lot better when the Steam Deck came out because they weren't using United Radio, and United Radio is a lot more scrutinizing when it comes to warranty repairs. Whereas like when the thing came out, people were frying their motherboards trying to upgrade SSDs, and Valve was saying, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll swap that out for free. It'll take a couple of weeks to get to you, you, but we'll do that free of charge. And now if you're doing an upgrade yourself and you break off one of the pegs in the Steam Deck case, not saying I did it, I totally did, United Radio will come back and say, hey, we're going to charge you for the repair because we have to replace the entire case. And even though you sent it in trying to get the bumper fixed, we can't do that unless we also repair the case, which like, that's not true, but I get where they're coming from, I guess. But yeah, the point is Valve has been really good lately about doing warranty and out of warranty repairs for people. So when you get a situation like this, where you genuinely feel bad for the person who bought it, it's easy to kind of see Valve as the villain, but I personally don't, because I feel like when you're working with a stolen product, there's just legality issues that come into play. What I would really love to see in a situation like this is Valve saying, hey, we know the Steam Deck's stolen. We're going to take your word for it that you didn't know it was stolen when you bought it because you bought it off eBay. What you can do is send it to us. We are going to return it to the rightful owner after fixing it, of course. And then just to be cool, because you got a secondhand Steam Deck for some reason or another, we're not going to look into that in any way. We'll send you the Steam Deck you originally thought you were buying free of charge. I don't think they're going to do that, again, because it opens up weird legality things where maybe they could be sued over it. But just based on their track record in the past of how awesome they've been about fixing people's Steam Decks, even when the error was the user's fault, I would hope that maybe they've really behind the scenes tried to look into this and said, hey, it's something we looked into and it's not something that's feasible at this time.